Hello and welcome to Cult Products Podcast. I'm your host, Adam Yaya-Durrant, and joining me today we have Alex, who joined us on our last podcast. Say hi, Alex.
Hi,
She's waving and not saying anything.
That's how podcasts work, right?
Yeah, I think so. Unfortunately, our business partner and fellow podcastian, Philip Bolland, is not with us today as he's currently at a puppy pageant, getting his pooch all primed and ready to take the puppy poodle world by storm. I don't know what category he's going to be placing Pedro in, but don't know. What do you think?
Probably a friendliest Fido or most obedient potentially, but I don't know if Pedro is that obedient. But anyway, it's just one step to Crufts, isn't it? So
Crufts,
this is the beginning.
We might not ever see him again on the pod because he's just too now in that
the world.
So you're just left with two of us today, but we're going to tackle a topic which has come up quite a few times in some of the chats that we've had with founders. And it's a little bit on stuff we've touched before, but we think it's really interesting, and it's something that definitely Alex and I have kind of a lot of experience with now and some views on. And it's kind of like it's a little bit around the imposter syndrome kind of complex. A lot of people find it quite super daunting making that leap and starting a business, especially if they've kind of gone through, which, let's be like frank, everyone does, a very linear kind of career path. Myself as a graphic designer, that's the kind of path that I trod, and it was kind of fairly kind of clear and of that kind of progression through those stages. Alex is we're going to her kind of background, but it's more of a project manager. So again, quite a kind of clear cut black and white kind of job description. So how do you kind of make that leap from going from that kind of role into running a business is what we're going to kind of unpack today. Right, Alex?
Yeah, we'll do a bit of that. Probably a good place to start because obviously our listeners would have heard a lot about you and Phil and your background, but my background, I can give you a bit of a 411, as they say. So I joined Yaya about 4 years ago and joined joined the guys as a project manager, just like supporting with this traditional project management tasks, and that was my job spec. That was it. But then it swiftly became apparent that my project management expertise were going to need to be expanded, let's say. So just started doing lots of other things. But yeah, traditionally, like my linear career path was project management, project director, project coordinator to begin with, many moons ago. And yeah, since joining you, Adam and Phil, I can say I hate the expression, but it's when
you're going to say I need the hats.
Yeah,
because I was thinking it then. I was thinking literally, someone's going to say I've had to wear many hats, and I'm so glad. Well, I've just said it annoyingly, but
you said it.
I'm so glad it was going to be coming from you.
I did put a massive caveat around it though. Like if anyone didn't know what I was going to say,
everyone was expecting it. But it massively is true, right? And that's the kind of fundamental thing in starting a business, that adaptability piece. And that's why, it isn't for everyone, because you do have to kind of, navigate your way through so many different things and challenges. How did you find that then in terms of transferring from kind of traditional product management, which you still do with all the other million things you do? And do you kind of like miss that kind of role and compared to the role you have now, which is kind of doing everything and helping run the business essentially?
Yeah. Well, firstly, how did I find it? So to begin with, I guess I was probably a little bit shocked that I was getting asked to do, like, do you mind doing all the invoicing, and do you mind looking at all our finances, and do you mind just doing this? And I was like, okay, it's a little bit out of my wheelhouse, let's say, but sure, if you want me to, let's go for it. So I do feel like, oh my God, these guys think I'm like have way more knowledge on this stuff than I do. Maybe I'm giving off a finance vibe. I don't know.
Definitely.
They yeah, definitely.
Well, you do wear a lot of green, Alex, so we just associate that with the fact that you might, like finance.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah, love green. But yeah, I just thought, oh gosh, I'm definitely had that imposter kind of syndrome in the fact that I was like, oh my goodness, I don't think they'd know what I do.
Yeah. Well, I think that's like, I think we wouldn't have given you those tasks if we didn't think you could do them. And then obviously, I think the way that your personality and kind of attitude towards those things is why it's why we've been working together for so long. And that is
Yeah.
fundamentally a really, really important thing in terms of having kind of the people that you found a business with. If you are starting a business with a partner, you're obviously going to have like different skills, key skills. It's really good to make sure that your skills complement each other. And you do have to do a lot of different things. And I think in those, especially in those early stages, you really kind of work out the things that you're good at and not so good at. Which there's a lot of things that I'm pretty good at, and there's some stuff that I'm terrible at. Like, for example, like anything to do with finance and spreadsheets, generally not very good with or numbers. But luckily, Phil's extremely good on that front. And likewise, the three of us kind of work in that way where we play to each other's strengths.
I think it's definitely like having the kind of outlook that you just got to get stuck in and be willing to learn and give things a go, and whether you're going to be very good at it or you just realize very quickly that you're not going to be very good at it, that doesn't matter. It's just making sure that you're trying it out, essentially. I think that the thing about starting a business is that you're not going to be doing just your role with just your one hat. You're going to have loads of different roles within it, and that is what makes it a bit more interesting, to be honest, because not to be a downer, but we're going to be working for a long time in our lives, so you might as well try lots of different things, and then your career path will swerve a bit and be the non-linear type of career path, which will make your life a bit more interesting, and you gain skills along the way. So it is about that adaptability piece, I suppose.
Can I ask you something? It's an interesting question, because kind of ask myself this sometimes. Do you think now you've kind of had this exposure to running a business and like all the different kind of nuances to it, do you think you could go back to like the steady 9 to 5 and like kind of a simplified? I mean, sometimes I dream of that sometimes, for sure, but the reality is I don't know if I could do that.
Yeah, sometimes for sure. Like I do sometimes. I guess the routine might be quite a good thing for me, but actually, when you know what's coming every day in, day out, it is a bit more humdrum. So I don't know. It's really hard because who knows what's going to happen in my life. But at present, I would say that I would still find it quite hard to go back to that, and not having the flexibility and freedom to a certain extent in what we're doing and how you do things. That's one thing that I really would struggle to go back to, working for a big organization or a big agency. There's so many stakeholders and hierarchies and all that, so it definitely it's a great environment to be in for people at a certain time of their life. But for me now, I'd say that I don't think I could. I really don't think I could.
That's a really, and we're not knocking those larger organizations and the people that work within those roles. I think it is a situational thing, isn't it? And like where you're at in your life. And I guess in terms of like what you want to achieve and the different exposure to different experience, different things, and learning new things. Because it's quite interesting, because I think people sometimes assume that if you're running a business, you kind of know everything, and you don't know anything. You're just always kind of making it up as you go along. And I say that in like terms of like obviously guidance around that. And one thing I'd mention and advise to people is get mentors, get like people who are more experienced than you. Mentorship is something that was massive for us at the start, and we kind of used that a lot to soundboard things that we've just never done before, like from more practical things like how the hell do we write an SOW, like what happens with like legal stuff, and
Yeah.
lean on like your network to help provide things like accountants, things like legal people, all the stuff that's a little bit like feels quite overwhelming. And when we talk to people in the kind of mentor group that we do, that's the stuff that they're like, that they kind of stifles them. And I think it stops a lot of people from actually starting businesses as well, because they feel this kind of like, well, I'm a great designer, I can start a really good agency, but I just don't have a clue about how to run a business and everything that entails in it. And it is like, you have to split your time up. You have to, as Alex said, wear many of those hats. But
I'm going to put a buzzer down for every time we say that.
Okay. Yes, but you do have to split your time up, and you can't just be doing like the creative stuff. I guess for me, like my kind of experience is it like I kind of didn't really think too much ahead of like that kind of stuff. I kind of just went into it. I had been freelancing, so I kind of knew a bit about how like the intricacies about running a business, but not to the scale of obviously running Yaya. And it's very quickly that you kind of realize that yes, you are a designer still, but you're more, most importantly, a business owner, and you've got responsibilities, whether that's like paying your VAT or whether it's like supporting and building a team and all that kind of stuff. So it just very quickly changes, and it's quite I don't know, it's quite scary but exciting at the same time.
You could definitely get really bogged down by all those pretty heavy going admin things. It can be really daunting, but like you said, if you have a mentor and someone even that's just done it before that can support you a bit, then that's obviously gonna you're going to reap the rewards from having that person, having that sounding board.
Like some of my biggest tips in those early days: get a really good accountant. Pay a bit more if you have to for better service, because they'll save you much more money in the long run. That's something that I've made a mistake in a previous job, but having a good accountant is really, really great way to like foundationally sets you up correctly. Get all your kind of operational bits in place early before you kind of maxed out all your spreadsheets. Like, you can kind of do so much on spreadsheets, but start to like invest in operational tools at an early stage, so you can track like business development, so you can track kind of things like project management and all that kind of stuff. What would you say? Would you agree with that, Alex? Because I think we're quite sophisticated, like from I don't know, but what did you think?
Well, I was just going to say, when we first started, when I first joined you, we used to use Monday, didn't we, for all our sort of new business sales, and even just having those sessions every week, making sure that we were having that time, an hour and a half, whatever it might be, to kind of go through that list and make sure that people were doing their, following up on their actions or whatever with these contacts that we had through, mentors or through LinkedIn. It's a really good focus point. So it doesn't even have to be Monday or anything at that very outset. I don't think, anything like that could just be a spreadsheet, just as long as you're having those, have something down and having that focus around it.
I think that's a really good point. I think it's that consistency, which is really key, and discipline, which I think when you're a smaller business, and some of the guys who are founders on their own have mentioned this, that self-motivation and self-discipline is really difficult when you're like your own kind of boss. And
Yeah.
I definitely find like, that for me is something that I massively struggle with as an individual. And that's why like working with others is massively beneficial to me, because you're not accountable for just yourself. You kind of you have responsibility. So but if you can, if you are working, if you are starting out on your own, keeping some consistency in terms of like when you do stuff, like being quite diary focused. So having a time slot for when you do business development, like we do ours on a Monday at a certain time, when you do planning, when you do those things that you should try and do as an individual, you have to do really to a certain extent, keeping those in and just keeping some kind of consistency around those things, I think is really a key point, and something is needed.
It is really useful having those, specific allocated time slots to focus on those certain things. But that, as you say,
But
can often get pushed back and pushed back. But you just have to keep going with them.
and again, these are all kind of things that I really didn't have any exposure to before, like coming into starting Yaya. Just my job was to do the creative direction and design and make things look great. And I'm playing down the role of brand, but what I mean by that is just none of these kind of more operational things were really, they were all kind of taken care for by someone else, and didn't really
For
think too
sure.
much of them.
Yeah, well, on the flip side, for me, like before Yaya, I was always just on the side of, ops and project management, whereas coming into Yaya, I now like edit videos, art direct things, oversee creative much more than I ever did before at any other job. Working in a startup has given me the opportunity to be able to do that, and I love it. It's great. But it's something that wasn't in my job spec when I joined.
Yeah, that is something that's interesting. If you are like, regimented to a job spec, and that's kind of like, because some people are, right, they need those kind of those constructs to do their role.
Very, very black and white.
I think our advice would be also like, don't 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 hire those people, because as harsh as that sounds, but they won't enjoy working at a startup, because we know how like chaotic it can be. And if they need to know that the reality of like the business is it's just not like that at the start. The processes aren't in place. So advice is, if you're like that, probably isn't right for you to start up a business, because the kind of the biggest thing that you have to embrace is change, and is the fact that every day is often different, and there's often like smaller and bigger problems that you have to solve on a regular. And so if you are not that character, and you just need to have very clear definition about what your duties are, then it's probably not the right one for you.
Yeah, I mean, do you think it would work if there was someone who was very, very, this is my box and I'm going to stay in it, and then they, went into business with someone who was very, not that built at all? Do you think that would work?
That's a really good question. I don't know. I think maybe like the collaboration could work, but I mean at the end of the day, that you need to both like support each other, and know when to kind of push and pull. And if one person's like, say, well, I'll just you don't like doing sales, so I'll pick up the sales and I'll pick up the invoicing, and I'll do this and I'll do that, then it's just going to be very lopsided, and that's not scalable. I didn't really think about the fact that, for some reason, just didn't think about the fact that we're going to have to be doing sales the way that we are, and like going out and doing proposals. I just didn't really envision the actual reality of that, and until we actually did it. And then I realized how much my time was spent in that world compared to designing, which initially, when I think me and Phil and I did an exercise when we first started the business, and he said to me, how much time do you think you should be spending doing design? How much time do you think you should be spending doing, like, working on the business or working working for the business, working at the business, and drew like a little kind of pie chart, and I kind of was very much like, yeah, well, I want to be like, doing all the art direction and being on the front and on the tools and creating and so I'm going to say like 70, like 80, 90% designing, and then he was like, wrong. And then I was like, and I think when I first saw that, like the pie chart get swiped back down to like the reality of like the situation of what it would entail, I think initially my heart sunk because I was like, but I'm a designer. I want to design.
What have I signed up for?
What have I signed up for? Like, this isn't what I envisioned. But no, and so initially I did then have that kind of like shudder of like, oh, okay, this isn't the this is going to be quite different to what I assumed. So, but then lo and behold, like kind of feeling a bit out of my comfort zone on things has really like given me so much more fulfillment. Because I was like sitting on a pretty comfy chair, I think, before riding the linear kind of progression through
definitely
being a designer.
design guy. What do you think's been the most, sorry, it's getting a bit reflective, but what do you think has been the most out of your comfort zone moment, do you think, of Yaya?
There's interesting because there's been like ones where like we've just had to like go and do workshops in crazy places, and they're like, that's felt a little bit uncomfortable, but that's mainly due just because of like timelines or something like that. I think initially the sales stuff, and I think that's what everyone we speak to is really like nervous of, like kind of doing business development. Like, how do I like have conversations with people that don't feel like a sales conversation, or I'm trying to sell them something, and there's no real kind of way of, I don't know, there's no
cool
way of
way
really training it. I don't know, it's like if you're a likable person, if you can chat, if you're like a friendly person, just reach out to the people and go for coffees, and things just kind of organically, like doors organically open, and projects and connections like naturally happen. For me, that's always been like the kind of go-to there. And because my initial thoughts, and we've talked about in previous pods about with a friend of the pod, Ben, about sales and how to like how to show up and be yourself, and that's how important that is. But yeah, I think that was the thing that I literally was like, I don't have a clue like how to do that. And I hadn't really written things like SOWs or proposals or stuff like that before. But then once you crack it, you start really enjoying it, because it's something different as well than what you're usually used to. So I think it's like the initial, oh gosh, and then like once you kind of get used to it, it becomes a bit more like bread and butter, I guess. What about you?
Yeah. Well, there's been quite a few. I mean, there's been some kind of bigger kind of stakeholder meetings that I never would have done, I don't think, beforehand, which are very much like, I don't know, you kind of put off getting them in the diary and stuff, but you just kind of like have to eat is the expression eat the toad or eat the frog? Like,
well, last eat the elephant. Did you remember?
Yeah,
that? Like,
how to eat an elephant. One. Yeah,
how to eat
I
an
do
elephant.
think, but eat the frog is like doing the scary and out of your comfort zone things, but getting them done earlier, and then you just feel so much. I think it's eat the frog or eat the toad. Anyway, I'm going to look it up. And then you just feel better, so good for doing it and letting it done, because it's done. And you're like, oh, I can do this now. So that's another thing to add to my belt, like managing hats, belts,
frogs. What else do we need to cover? Yeah, I think that's a really good one, and I think actually that's something that I think we just kind of forget after a while, because I guess, another thing which is great about, starting a startup and running a business is that you get to speak to people at the top table. And I don't think you really get that exposure as much. Well, I didn't, when I was working at, at other larger startups and tech companies, I would never dream of speaking to the CEO or one of the directors, really. You spoke to your kind of line manager, and or if I was line manager often, so you were kind of like the port of call, and above that was the head of the department. So you're really kind of sheltered in that hierarchy and that org. So like I think when we take a step back and think about the people that we actually speak to on the daily, they're like they're founders like us, a lot more advanced, but they've in terms of like what they're usually more experienced in their kind of field in terms of what they're doing. But it's amazing that we have those conversations on a daily, and it's at first you're kind of there is a little bit of, it feels quite daunting, doesn't
it? Definitely.
But then you kind of like realize that, hey, you're a founder too, you're just, and they're human and you're speaking to them on a level, and it's great.
I think that's the thing, it's like that everyone is just human, just trying to get through life. And you don't need to be so intimidated by them, I guess, unless there's like warrant to, but most of the time everyone's pretty decent.
So Alex, we've covered like the importance of adaptability. We've covered around like kind of learning, acquiring new skills and fulfillment, and how you kind of need to have that like mindset in terms of like the way that you kind of figure out things and problem solve and constant learning and all that kind of stuff. Another one that I think is good is around like if you are like when you start building a team and you have like a few of you like we do as founders, you know when to kind of pivot, when you kind of assign roles. So when you're doing something and it's like you're kind of struggling or not doing it well, like you can work out. I kind of did cover this slightly before, but don't just kind of keep going and trudging. Like if you're kind of finding that someone is struggling on a certain role, just like move around and just make like trying to work out who's best to do what. I think it's really important. We've done that a lot, I think, at Yaya, like where to try and get the right mold of where to play each other in certain kind of roles. I think we've covered this.
I think we have, but I think it's good to kind of bring back. It is good to kind of pivot things, and it goes back to the adaptability piece. And if you've got someone working in your team that potentially could be better, you can see that they're struggling and they're better suited elsewhere, then it is good, and it will give them more of an opportunity to really excel in something else, rather than like struggle city over in the other corner where they're just not happy, and it's just not gonna be conducive to anything, your work, and you'll end up worrying about them, and it just isn't a good thing. So it just goes back to the point of adaptability and like adapting people and you, and
because I think it's like it's good. I've said about like throwing the job spec out the window, and I mean there's I say that kind of like hardly, because it is good to kind of define your role to a degree, like just to then understand like the things that you're working. And then if actually what we found was useful is that we kind of ask people to write their own kind of job spec, to kind of, because then it's a good way for them to identify the things that they feel that they're not so strong at. So that's quite a good way of kind of broaching that conversation if it's a little bit tricky, or can't be honest.
It could go the other way though. They could just write down all the things.
I'm just you'll be brilliant at this.
But our experiences, it's kind of worked. But there's always that flag.
Yeah, I think it's worked for us. Yeah. Are you really good at that? Okay. Yes, but I think it makes it like, it puts a bit more onus on. I think it's quite nice as an exercise. It means that you're not dictating to them what they should be doing. Like you have an idea, and like I think we've drafted up between ourselves like multiple versions of like what our kind of roles and responsibilities are.
What's my job
obviously
again?
No. What is my title? But obviously know that this will constantly pivot and change. So I think the big thematic from the whole of this is really like there's going to be a lot of change, and really just kind of embrace it, really, because that's the only thing we can do, and continue to learn, because you always will, effectively.
Yeah, exactly. And we talked about that a lot last week, didn't we? In the fact that you are just always learning new things, when you think you might be at a stage where you're not having to learn anything anymore, then don't worry, because you're going to have something else that you're going to have to learn pretty soon, just coming at you around the corner.
Yeah. I actually think also, like, sorry, just go back to your question about what was the hardest thing
Oh
I've
yeah,
had to learn. I think it would be definitely the people element is a big kind of like change up from just being a designer. When you're running a business and then you're scaling it and you're hiring people, that then really starts to change a lot of things, because you're responsible for those people financially, you're responsible for those people emotionally to a degree, and essentially like keeping them happy, keeping them kind of fulfilled with work and fulfilled with the job, and maintaining culture. Those things are the stuff that's like it is really difficult. That makes sales feel easy. But I love the people element at the same time, but it definitely comes with like its own challenges
yeah,
for sure.
yeah. Well, also, I suppose the people element in a time where we know a lot of what we do is virtual. It's hard. It's hard to like manage the people when you're not with the people all the time in a traditional place you would be. So I think that yeah, it's one of those things that it is hard, and people are very complex. So
Yeah, and we'll probably do more of like reflective pod with when Phil's back, to go over some of that stuff. But just because we're on it now, I'd say kind of investing in like that department, like that people department, is a worthwhile investment if your plan is to scale like the scale of the business. Get that
definitely,
really aligned and set up at an early stage. Bring in a head of people if you can, bring in like set kind of values and culture, and actually kind of live and try and live and breathe it rather than just say it. I think those things are really important, and I value them massively. And like, but I think you know it's like when it doesn't align, it's not great. It's not great. So I think investing in those things are really important, basically, and they
yeah,
they go a long way in the future for sure.
yeah, quite.
Okay, so I think we've covered it really. I think for people who are setting up a business, the main takeaway with this, and I know we talk about it a lot, is just that ability to adapt, learn, and pivot, and the importance of working. If you are working with a team, fortunate enough to have co-founders or other, people working with you, that you trust each other, you allow each other to make mistakes because we all do, we're all human. You support each other through the rubbish times and good and the bad, and you play to each other's strengths, and that's that's a kind of secret source of success, I guess.
Lovely. It is just embracing the change that comes with starting and growing a business, and supporting people as they learn things, because people don't know how to do spreadsheets and Figma designs from the outset. So it is good to be patient with those people until they're a bit
Yeah,
better at those things.
it's acceptance as well that your kind of role will never be the same again, in the most like dreary way, because you will change massively, and grow and develop through that process.
Yes,
Right, I think
yes,
that's enough. I think that's
in the
yeah,
most in the
the most
most non-depressing way. Your role and your life will never be the same again.
never be the same. You can never go
That's a
back.
good.
You can
Yeah, you
never
never
go
go
back
back
to
the old
that.
ways. I think that's a good place to end, to be honest.
Okay.
Good message to end on.
It was
um,
supposed to be a positive message. I hope it comes across as that.
it is positive, I think.
Okay.
It's good. Cool.
All right. That's all
So
right.
we'll wrap up there then, and we'll catch you next time. And if you'd like to hear more of the ramblings on the Cult Product podcast, then please like and subscribe, and keep listening, everybody. Bye.
Cool. Bye bye.